Hello everyone, this is Yours Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the First Emperor of Wei Let's Talk Lore series, as we continue with episode 5, titled Yang Xiu. In our last episode, we introduced the Ding brothers, who through their clan's past relationship with Cao Cao, helped push for Cao Zhi's chances as heir, even if it meant using some rather unscrupulous methods to kill off officials in support of Cao Pi. But the vizier who helped Cao Zhi the most in the battle for heir was not the Ding brothers, but rather Yang Xiu, who hailed from the prestigious Yang clan of Hongnong. Now, the Yang clan is probably the most powerful gentry clan during the course of the entire Han dynasty, as they got their start with their forefather Yang Xi, who had served as Liu Bang's lieutenant of cavalry before earning himself a marquis title by being one of the 5 men who came back with a piece of Xiang Yu's body. And if this story confuses you, what happened was that by the end of the Chu Han contention, Xiang Yu, the leader of Chu, committed suicide in front of Liu Bang's army. And since Liu Bang had previously promised titles to anyone who could bring back Xiang Yu's dead body, his cavalry swarmed towards Xiang Yu, and a huge fight broke out amongst the Han troops. And in the end, after numerous self-inflicted casualties, 5 men returned with pieces of Xiang Yu's body. Yang Xi, being the lieutenant of the cavalry himself, was in the scramble, and luckily, he managed to return with one of Xiang Yu's legs. While this might seem rather silly, it essentially helped cement his clan for the next 4 generations as the Marquis of Chiquan. But since this happened at the beginning of the Han Dynasty, almost 400 years before the Three Kingdoms period, let's fast forward 8 generations to Yang Zhen, who is the great-great-grandfather of Yang Xiu, as he would eventually become the Grand Tutor in the year 120, and 3 years later, he will be elevated to the position of Grand Excellency of the Works, before ending his political career as the Grand Commandant. Then his second son, Yang Bing, would go on to also become Grand Commandant, before Yang Bing's son, Yang Ci, also becomes Grand Commandant. And of course, then his son, Yang Biao, who is also Yang Xiu's father, would serve as the Grand Excellency of the Masses, Grand Tutor, and eventually Grand Commandant, before being removed by Cao Cao after Cao Cao seized control of Emperor Liu Xie. So, if the Yuan clan of Runan want to brag about having 4 generations of Sangong, then the Yang clan can claim the same, as they actually had 4 generations of Grand Commandants leading up to Yang Xiu. And speaking of the Yuan clan of Runan, while the main reason of why Yang Biao lost his position was due to his personal displeasure with Cao Cao becoming the regent after seizing control of the emperor, the actual excuse Cao Cao used is that Yang Biao's wife and Yang Xiu's mother is actually Lady Yuan, who was Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu's sister. So when Yuan Shu declared the dynasty calendar of Zhong, Yang Biao was immediately removed from the courts, stripped of his titles, and put in prison. But thankfully, due to the efforts of many a court, including Kong Rong and Yang Biao's son Yang Xiu, Yang Biao would eventually be pardoned, as he really done nothing wrong and was only jailed through association as an excuse so that Cao Cao can remove him from the Grand Commandant position. He would eventually gain back the position of Grand Tutor for the next 7 years, before excusing himself from politics, as he did not want to have a front row seat to the usurpation of the Han. But sadly, because Yang Biao would live until 225, he would actually end up witnessing Cao Pi's usurpation. And despite Cao Pi's differences with his son Yang Xiu, Cao Pi ended up offering the position of Grand Commandant again to Yang Biao. But as a Han loyalist, Yang Biao would use his age as an excuse to decline the position, as the first Grand Commandant of Wei will ultimately go to Jia Xu. Yang Biao would still be pushed to serve as one of the 9 ministers of the Wei courts in his last few years, where Emperor Cao Pi treated him with the utmost respect, before he would pass away at the age of 84. Now, unfortunately, his son Yang Xiu would not be so lucky, as Yang Xiu was much more pragmatic and ambitious compared to his father. Seeing the Cao clan's control of the court, Yang Xiu chose to embrace the Cao clan's rule, rather than to shy away from it out of any idealistic loyalties to the faltering Han. In 196, when Cao Cao first seized the emperor and immediately fired and imprisoned his father, Yang Xiu, who had just turned 20, decided the best course forward for his clan was to embrace Cao Cao, as he would use his court recommendation to get a post in the prime minister's office, as he would end up becoming one of Cao Cao's personal secretaries. Eventually, due to his administrative skills and scholarly talents, Yang Xiu would become Cao Cao's 主簿, or the head secretary, as Cao Cao would become extremely impressed with his administrative skills in running the country, especially in Cao Cao's absence, as Cao Cao had to spend the majority of his energy on military campaigns. In a sense, Yang Xiu's rise did help his father, as Yang Biao would eventually get released, as he would get the chance to become grand tutor for the young emperor for quite some time. But Yang Xiu's proximity and importance to Cao Cao also made him someone who both Cao Pi and Cao Zhi wanted to befriend in their battle for heir. As you have to understand, in those years, as Cao Cao wavered on the matter of heir, he would often quiz Cao Pi and Cao Zhi to test their abilities. And as his head secretary, who handles Cao Cao's day-to-day affairs, Yang Xiu knew about these tests ahead of time. And for reasons unexplained in any historical records, Yang Xiu ended up siding with Cao Zhi, as he would frequently provide Cao Zhi with the content of the surprise tests. And this naturally gave Cao Zhi the upper hand, as he would continue to outshine Cao Pi. So in 214, when Cao Cao left to attack Sun Quan, Cao Zhi, who had just turned 23, was left in charge of the imperial court in Ye as the regent in his first major test to see if he could become heir. While this would be the closest chance Cao Zhi would have to actually become heir, thanks in large part to Yang Xiu's aid, Cao Cao could not ultimately make up his mind, as while Cao Zhi was beyond talented as a scholar and poet, his artistic nature made him rather attached to alcohol, as he would frequently host parties with other scholars as they drank without inhibition. And aside from the drinking problems holding Cao Zhi back from becoming heir, Cao Pi, the other contender for the heir position, was also no slouch either, as while he was not an otherworldly talented poet, Cao Zhi was a highly skilled swordsman, a capable military mind, a respected Confucian scholar, an above-average poet, and most of all, a much more disciplined individual. Because while Cao Zhi continued to host parties and get drunk, while acting as regent, Cao Pi acted differently when he was left in charge as regent in the past. As back in 206, when Cao Cao had left for a northern campaign in the Bin province, Cao Pi, who was 25 at the time, was given the chance to hold the position of acting regent in a very similar manner to test his capability as heir. At the time, the young Cao Pi was fascinated with hunting, as he would frequently host hunts with other officers as a chance to hone their archery abilities. However, once he became the acting regent, his tutor, Cui Yan, yes, the same Cui Yan who would eventually be framed by Ding Yi, scolded him for his actions, as Cui Yan believed that as a regent now, he must put the matters of state ahead of his leisurely pursuits. So in response, Cao Pi brought all his hunting supplies, along with a specially made ornate cage carriage used for hunting tigers, to the front of Cui Yan's house, as he would burn them all in front of his tutor to inform him that he will give up hunting in order to focus on becoming a qualified regent. And it was also this moment that he won Cui Yan over to support him as the next heir, despite Lady Cui's marriage to Cao Zhi. And with this, we're going to be ending our episode here, as we'll continue next time with Cao Pi's group of advisors, as we have provided enough background on Cao Zhi's advisors in these last 2 episodes to finally dive into some of the core intrigues between these 2 groups that would ultimately determine who will become Cao Cao's heir. So hopefully you have enjoyed this episode enough to drop a like to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!